Hey, friends, welcome back to the In No Hurry podcast. This is your host, Cole Douglas Claiborne. Excited to be back with you guys this week for another episode. And I'm excited to introduce you to my guest this week. His name is Vince Vawter. Vince and I have known each other for a long time. His son and my brother have been friends since college. And I've got to know Vince a little bit better recently as he started following me on Substack. And he is an author. He also spent a long time in journalism, and that's sort of how I know him as well. He spent a lot of time at my hometown newspaper, and I also worked at that newspaper. I think we were there at different times, but knew him from my time in journalism as well. And I'm excited to talk with him about his books. He had his first book come out years ago called Paperboy, and it's sort of a fiction slash memoir book based on his life. And what's really cool is one, he won a Newbery Award for that book, but also that book has become a musical. It was turned into a stage production that's now a musical, and as he'll share, it's going to be performed by professional actors for the first time later this year. And then he had two other books come out as part of that series, one called Copy Boy and another one called Man Boy, that all kind of follow the character's life throughout the story of that he set in the first one. And we'll talk also about his most recent book, which is called The Stuttering Stoic: How an Ancient Philosophy Helped Me Find My Voice. And as Vince will share, he has suffered with I don't know if suffered is the right word. He's dealt with a stutter for most of his life, and really enjoyed talking to him about the process of writing this book, really just the writing process in general, but also navigating life as a person with a stutter, how that's kind of shaped his journey, and how he has found writing to be the craft of choice. And what's cool is he's later in his life, as he'll mention, he's close to 80 years old, and he is still as sharp as ever. And so I just really enjoy talking to Vince, learning about writing, his journey of writing, learning about his process of writing, and especially this new book of his. So I think you're going to enjoy this conversation. Here is my conversation with Vince Vawter. Vince, welcome to the show. I feel like it's been a while since you and I talked. Your son and my brother are good friends, and that's kind of how we know each other. But we also share very similar paths in journalism. We both worked at the Evansville Courier and Press. I don't know if we were ever there at the same time, but we both have that on our resume.
Yes.
You are an author and a writer, and I've enjoyed connecting with you on Substack lately as well. So thanks for joining the show. How are you?
Thank you very much. Yeah. It's good to be here. When I hang around with you young guys, I start to feel younger, and that's why I like to do that.
Well, yeah, I always enjoyed getting to talk to you, especially whenever I was younger and looking at going into journalism and picking your brain and following your career. You've just got a really cool career, which we'll get into. You've been an author. We were just talking before we recorded about one of your books being turned into a musical. That's a really cool thing that I'd love to hear about. But I'd love
Yeah.
for you to kind of give just a brief, I don't know, synopsis of your career. And like I said, I know you worked in journalism, and now you've been writing books and things like that. But what would you want the listeners to know about you that maybe people don't always
Well,
know?
I started out working in newspapers as a sports writer
Yeah.
for the Pine Bluff Commercial,
Okay.
a small daily newspaper, and I'm a person who stutters. And I found out I had a hard time talking to coaches who had just lost a big game, and I would start stuttering, and they didn't want to listen to me. And so I decided I would learn how a newspaper worked on the desk. And so I went in and I found out I was a good desk man. I could lay out pages, I could write headlines and everything. So I went to the press center after that. And then I went to the Knoxville News Sentinel
Mhm.
as the managing editor. And then I went to the Evansville Courier and Press as I guess the president and I guess the editor. And I had a good 10 years in Evansville, and I could kind of see the writing on the wall that newspapers were not not in the best position.
Yeah.
So I retired early and I started writing,
Yeah.
and I had no idea if anybody would read my books. I didn't know if anybody would publish them. I had no idea. And the first book I wrote, Paperboy, won a lot of awards. It won a
Yeah.
Newbery Honor, and it's been published now in 22 languages. I just
Wow. That's
believe that.
cool.
I had no idea that was going to happen,
Yeah.
and it's turned into a second career, and it's one I'm very proud of.
Yeah, I'm looking at your books on your website now. Paperboy, Copyboy, Man Boy, and then
Right.
now
Yeah.
newest book, The Stuttering Stoic, How an Ancient Philosophy Helped Me Find My Voice, which we'll get into as well. So
Right.
pretty good body of work you've got building so far.
Yeah, yeah, and I'll soon be 80 years old, and I don't feel like I'm 80. I feel like I'm something else. I feel like I'm a teenager again.
That's awesome. Hey, you're staying young. There you go.
Good.
When you left journalism to get into writing books, this is kind of the transition that I'm in. Journalism writing, it's something that I'm very comfortable and familiar with. But then sitting down to write a book, it's a whole other process that I often get intimidated by. So I'm curious how you kind of navigated that when you were writing your first book. Did you have mentors that helped you? How did you figure out that whole process?
Well, the first thing you have to do is you have to unlearn what you learned in newspapers. In writing for newspapers, news magazines, you have to tell and not show.
Yeah.
You have to be straight up front. You have to tell the facts. You have to play it straight. In fiction, you have to show and not tell.
Hmm.
Now, that's you know, I'd heard that all my life. I never really understood that until I got into fiction writing, and that is exactly right. You have to you have to write around the edges, and you have to show. You just can't come right out and say things, and that was very important. And I had to learn that, and that's why it took 5 years to write Paperboy. I mean, it's a
Yeah.
250 page little book, but it took me 5 years to write it. I wrote 200,000 words just to get the 50,000 words that I needed, and
Yeah.
that was hard. It was hard. It was a good lesson, though. It really was.
Yeah, I was a journalism major in college, and then they made us pick a minor, and I wanted to do something that I felt like was as closest to journalism as I could that I could find, and creative writing was what I settled
Yeah.
on. And it wasn't really like something that I was super excited about, but I was glad that I did it. And I actually really liked my creative writing professors, but even still, the idea of writing fiction intimidates me. So I know some of that's based on your story, and maybe you were able to pull from that, but
Right.
thinking of characters and seeing a plot line develop from the beginning of the story to the end, to me, that feels like a very difficult thing to do. So I'm curious how you went from basically being a nonfiction writer in journalism and doing hard news and dealing with real life events to then transitioning to writing fiction and being able to see a story from the end. Like I'm writing a nonfiction book, a Christian nonfiction book, and that's easy because I'm using like part of my own experiences, but it's hard for me to envision developing a character from start to finish and storylines and how they all interconnect. So I'm curious how you were able to kind of build that web and everything.
Well, in Paperboy, I started out, it started as a memoir written in the language of an 11-year-old. And then I showed it to some people, and they said, well, it's missing some things. And one of the things it was missing was a mentor for the boy.
Mm,
And, I did not have a mentor. And so I had to create one. And that's where Stoicism comes in. I started reading a lot about Stoicism, and I patterned one of the characters in the book as a mentor, as a Stoic philosopher, and that's how that comes in. And there is only one character in Paperboy who is not straight out of my childhood. As a
oh.
matter of fact, most of them even have the same names.
Oh wow. Okay.
So I kind of cheated really in that in that you know a lot of that is not fiction. I mean,
Yeah.
a lot of that actually happened to me. There are a few things are fictionalized, but it dawned on me after my third book, which all take from my life,
Mhm.
that I may not be a very good fiction writer because most of it is memoir.
Yeah.
So I like to say I kind of cheated on the fiction part.
Well, I mean, you won a Newbery honor, so I feel like you're doing something right. So,
Right, yeah. My agent said she felt the reason your first book was such a success is you didn't know what you were doing. And I didn't,
yeah.
I didn't know I had a middle grade book, I didn't know I had a young adult book. I was just writing my story, and I was trying to make it interesting,
Yeah.
and she said a lot of authors think too much uh, about uh, what their readership ought to be and this and that and everything. And I didn't have a clue. I just was telling my story. That's all I was doing.
Yeah.
And she said that's why she thinks it was a success.
Yeah. When you wrote your next two books, I assume those didn't take 5 years. I assume your your process was kind of, you'd
I
figured
got
out
a
the
little bit
process.
better. Yeah.
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 Although Copy Boy took 2 years, and then I guess Man Boy it took about a year and a half. But now this is an interesting story. I think Paperboy was a success. Penguin Random House was very pleased with it, and I said, okay. And I started getting a lot of questions from readers. I got like 500 or 600 emails from readers about, well, what about this and what about that? So I said, okay, I'm going to write a second book where the same boy, instead of 11 years old, he's 17 years old,
Mhm.
and he's a copy boy for the newspaper. Well, I just started writing it, and I spent a lot of hours on it. My agent showed it to Penguin Random House, and they said, "Well, Vince, we love your book. We think it's well done, but there's a problem. We don't let our popular characters grow older."
Oh,
And I said, "Well,
interesting.
that's not life." And the editor at Penguin Random House said, "Well, that may not be life, but that's publishing." So,
Wow.
so we sold it to somebody else, um, who brought it out as a young adult book. And then, I decided, okay, the story is still not done, so I'm going to take the Paperboy to when he's 21 years old. And Man Boy, it takes place in the 5 days surrounding the assassination of Dr. Martin Luther
Oh,
King.
wow. Okay.
And it's I mean, I was there, and
Mhm.
so uh, it's got some history in it, and um, uh, it's got headlines from the newspaper in it,
Wow.
and so in a way, it's not much fiction either, but I think it's an interesting way to tell the story and what happened in the city.
It kind of sounds like a mix of memoir, but also historical fiction. Would you say
Well, that's
that?
right. That's what it is.
Yeah.
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 Hmm.
Because I think about, Forrest Gump. I mean, the movie, it's far different than the book, but the movie, it's a character going through real life events. And I think that's why I resonated with that so much because it's like here's this fictional character, but also a believable character growing up through that time. So I think
Right.
that's cool that you use. First of all, I think that era of our country's history is fascinating. Obviously, it was very tumultuous, but there's so much history that happened during that time. So I love reading and watching stuff based in that time period. And your book, Paperboy, was turned into a musical, and that's a really
Right.
really cool thing. One question I had, did they include, was that before you wrote the sequels, or were the stories of the sequels kind of included in the musical? How did that all work?
They contacted me first, I know nothing about musical theater. It's totally foreign up to me. But there are four professionals who are from New York City, and they got a hold of my book, and they said, "Could we do this?" And we'd like you to come aboard as part of the team. And I said, "Well, yeah, but I mean, I don't know anything about what you're doing, but sure, sure, sure." I'll do it. It's been very interesting. Now, underlying all this is the fact that many people who stutter can sing without any problem.
Yeah.
So it's not too far-fetched that the copy boy sings a lot of his thoughts, and
Yeah.
and and so I think it works. It was performed in 2023 uh, at the Manhattan School of Music in New York, and I couldn't believe the job they did. These kids, well, I say kids, they're college
Yeah.
students, and they just, I mean, I think they knocked it out of the park for four performances. This fall, it's going to be produced at the Weather Vane Theater in Whitefield, New Hampshire, and it's going to be a professional, uh, you know, musical theater singers, and I'm looking forward to it. I think it's really going to be good, and we are looking to to push it out to schools and colleges where they can perform it. It's got 22 original songs. It's got a great score. I'm kind of excited about that. I think it's a good
Yeah.
way to tell the story, and while we tell it in a different way, it's the same story.
Yeah. I was reading kind of the backstory about that on your website, and you had an idea to put that to sort of a stage production, and your friend said that should be a musical,
Right,
which I think it's really cool because that, yeah, like you said, music is a way to I think that if I'm not mistaken, one of the members of Straight No Chaser actually has a stutter, and
right,
he's able, which we talked about Straight No Chaser being from IU. Both my
right,
brother and your son went there, and
right.
the music for this show is from an original Straight No Chaser member. But yeah, I think Josh would tell me how when they were at at parties in college, people would sing to the guy, and he would sing back because they knew that he had a stutter, and so
Right.
kind of funny,
Yeah.
but music has a way of being able to tell a story in a different way. And so I would think that that's got to be cool to see how somebody can reimagine your own story in a different way. And if I'm not mistaken, I feel like I've seen pictures of you where you were with those individuals, those college students, maybe while they were
Right.
rehearsing. So did you get a chance to sort of give them, like, hey, here's how I envisioned this character? I don't know if you were sort of playing as like a guest director of sorts.
Wh- One of my interesting jobs was teaching the paper boy how to stutter, and and that was a lot of fun. And he did an amazing job. In fact, uh, the actor who played the paper boy at the Manhattan School of Music is going to play the same role at the Weather Vane
Oh
Theater.
wow, okay.
He was so good at it. He's graduated now, and I think he's just to me, he is the paper boy, and
Yeah.
he's got the stutter down pat.
How hard is that to, if you don't naturally have a stutter, to learn that?
Uh, it's very hard because stuttering, a lot of people think it's just kind of repetitions, prolongations, that kind of stuff. Actually, it's a matter of blocks, bad airflow. There are some repetitions in it, but While I still stutter, I like to say I found my voice, which
Yeah.
means fluency to me is is if I can say anything I want to say anytime I want to say it. At that point, I consider myself fluent. It doesn't sound too good, but I mean that's okay. I just want to get my message out. When I listen back to podcasts, I'm always amazed at well, I didn't know I stuttered then because I don't pay any attention to it anymore.
Yeah.
And that's where stoicism comes in, to be indifferent to the things that make no difference.
Hmm.
That's what stoicism is, and that's why uh, I brought stoicism into my latest book. I think it's good for people who stutter to learn the Stoic mentality.
Hmm. Yeah. If we've talked about Indiana University, this past year, obviously the football team won the national championship. And the quarterback talked a lot about how he had gotten into stoicism. And
Yeah.
my brother Josh said that he had started, studying that as well and
Yes.
had found that to
Yes.
be helpful. So yeah, I'm curious, maybe people that are listening that aren't super familiar with stoicism. I know you gave kind of a brief definition, but what else would you want them to know as it relates to? I know it's an ancient philosophy. Most people maybe are familiar with it, but some listening may
Well,
not be.
a lot of people think that Stoicism is just keeping a stiff upper lip,
Hmm.
and just persevering. It's much more than that. It's a uh, it's a way to think about things. It's a way to process. Stoicism started in 300 BC, and a lot of the tenets of Stoicism is what formed Christianity. There is no conflict in Stoicism and Christianity. When I first started studying it, I was kind of worried about, well, is this going to take the place of my Christian faith? No, it's purely additive. In fact, it has helped me to understand my Christian faith. And one of the things, and I'm going to cheat here. Uh, John 1:1 says, "In the beginning was the Word was God, and the Word, excuse me, in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God." Jesus was with God in the beginning. You know, I'd heard that all my life. I did not understand it. That is from Stoicism, but they substituted logos for word. So a Stoic would say, in the beginning was logos, and the word was with logos. And Stoicism purely believes in a single God, and it's there's a lot of a Christianity in Stoicism, and it's not in conflict at all.
That's interesting. Yeah, I don't know a ton of the history on it, so that was a nice brief history lesson. I guess that's a nice segue into this latest book of yours. Those watching on YouTube, you can see it here. The Stuttering Stoic: How an Ancient Philosophy Helped Me Find My Voice. When did this come out? And I guess what was sort of the process in terms of the idea for this? When did the idea for this book come from? Just kind of what's the story behind it?
Well, when I was working on Paperboy, I knew I needed a character who who had a philosophical bent. So I just happened upon the study of a Stoicism, and I started looking at it, and I'm thinking, wait a minute, this philosophy, it's like it was written for the person who stutters. It's got so much in it, and so I just seized on that. And so I began my study of a stoicism in like the year of 2000, and I read it every day now. It is such a powerful way to look at things, and it's so simple. You know, sometimes sometimes you'll be reading, and you'll say, "Well, I knew that." Well, did you really know it? Did you know all the background to what got you there? And it's just a good way to look at things. So. Um, Now, this is interesting. I think, and I think you and your listeners will probably be interested in it. I wrote the book, what I thought should be the book, and I gave it to my agent, and she found some traditional publishers um, who were kind of interested in it, and
Hmm.
they said, "Well, okay, yeah, we'd like to take a shot at this, but first, Vince needs to." Take out a lot about speech language, a pathologist, and take a little of this out and add a little of this. And I said, wait a minute, you know, uh, you know, I've got the book exactly like I want it. I don't know if it's a good book. I just have it like I want it, like I see it. And, I don't want to take those things out.
Hmm.
I think that they are important to speech language pathologists and to people who stutter, uh, and I want them to read it. And so I decided uh, to go through an independent publisher, which means, I would have control over it.
Yeah.
And so that's what I did. I probably left some money on the table, but I mean that's not why I got into it anyway. That's not why I wrote it. And I'm proud to say there are several speech language uh, uh, colleges. The University of Texas has bought the book for all its undergraduate
Oh,
and
wow.
grad students who are going into speech language pathology. It explains a lot about what goes through a person who stutters mind when he's talking, when he's trying to
Mhm.
figure out things. And I think it needed to be written, and it needed to be written exactly the way I wrote it,
Mhm.
whether it's proper or not. Well, that's not for me to say.
Yeah. Yeah, I bet I'm willing to bet that's a dilemma that writers probably go up against that we don't know about, where maybe a publisher or an editor or somebody, wants to take something out or change the book. So for you, if there's somebody listening to this that, they're wanting to write a book and maybe they're running into that, or just the overall message of staying authentic to the message you believe in, what advice would you give to authors that maybe run into that or will run into that sort of a
Well,
situation?
well, the first thing is, you know, uh, when I wrote my second book, and I gave it to Penguin Random House, you know, I was a little upset that they said, "Well, it's a good book. We like it. We think you did a good job, but we don't let our popular characters grow older." Well, I got a little uh, uh, upset with that. Well, it's their business. I mean, it's their job, and they were exactly right. I went from a middle grade up to a young adult, and I probably confused my readers.
Hmm.
But I mean, I had in mind that Copy Boy would answer a lot of the questions which were raised in Paperboy, and so when a writer is looking to publish a book, they need to be concerned with exactly who their audience is. I completely do understand why Penguin Random House didn't want to publish Copy Boy.
Hmm.
It was because that they were changing genres, with the same writer, and I mean that's confusing. It is to the reader, so I had my own priorities, but they know the publishing business, and it's it's true. They don't let their popular characters grow older. Uh,
Yeah.
but that's their problem. This is my problem. I've got what I want to write. So I mean, it gets very complicated. It is very, very complicated. But writers learn should learn the publishing business. Uh, it's very complicated. They may not agree with all of it. They should study the publishing business, though. It's got its own rules. It's got its own mandates.
Yeah. And I think one thing that can be frustrating too is maybe sometimes as the writer just not seeing eye to eye with publishers on your book. And, I think even in my space, there's some writers that, they write something and they might feel like what they've written is just the best thing ever and they don't
Yeah,
take feedback super well. And how would you, I mean, you worked in journalism as an editor, you're editing stuff all the time. So I'm curious too, just like as a writer, a young writer that's going through the process and understanding that like, hey, you may get some tough feedback like you got about your book, and then coming back years later and saying, you know what, they may have been right.
yeah,
How important is it, I guess, to be able to take tough feedback and not take it personally, I guess, to have a thick skin if you're going to be a successful writer?
yeah. Well, you do need to stick with your guns up to a point.
Hmm.
And then you have to say, well, you know, I am writing this from my perspective, and the publisher has another perspective. And you have to honor that because they want to make money. I mean, that's their bottom line.
Yeah.
You know, uh, I think for writers, it's probably not the bottom line. I mean, we want to say what we want to say,
Yeah.
and it may or may not fit with the publishers, with their the way they look at things. I mean, it's very complicated. It is, and I have noticed though that a lot of traditional publishers, and I'm talking Simon and Schuster, Random House, all of them have started to go into the, I don't want to call self-publishing
Hmm.
vein because they realize that there are some people out there who have important things to say that may not fit with their publishing model, and so they give them leeway, and the writer at that point takes on a lot of the uh, marketing,
Hmm.
takes on a lot of other things, and but I think it's necessary. I mean, there are so many books written. Some shouldn't be written, but I mean that's all a part of the game.
Yeah.
And I think it's too bad it turns into a game at some
Hmm.
point. And but you know if you are committed to what you want to say, you will find the platform.
Yeah.
That platform, it may be with a traditional publisher. Uh, you know, uh, you may have to go the independent route,
Hmm.
but say what you want to say and say it in the best way you can. Um, and it's not easy.
Yeah.
It is certainly not easy.
Yeah, that's a battle that I've been facing for several years because to break into the Christian publishing space, a lot of times it doesn't matter oftentimes how good your idea is if you don't have a big social media platform or following, oftentimes publishers won't even be interested in your book. And so
Right.
this is something that I've been talking a lot about on Substack because there are a lot of really good writers. I mean, I just had Stephen Glosser on my podcast that I think you listened to that episode, and he went the self-publishing route as well. And he's written good stuff. I've had other friends that have self-published, and then there are people that they get popular for whatever reason, and it's like their stuff is not as good as that person's. How does that work? And I've talked
Right.
with friends in publishing. I've tried to make sense of it. Sometimes it's just one of those things where it's a game and somebody catches a lucky break. It's you don't know why it happens, and it's unfortunate because I feel like there are probably a lot of good books that have gone unpublished simply because publishers have cared more about the number attached to somebody's name
Right.
versus the message. And it's particularly discouraging in Christian publishing because you would think of all genres, that would be the one that cares the most about the message. But I do understand, like, they have to make money. One of the best ways that they can hedge their bet is to say this person has a built-in following. But the side effect is that it causes a lot of Christian writers to sacrifice a lot of their morals and ethics to sort of cut corners and get to places where they think they have to be to get to a book deal. And this is something I've been
Exactly.
talking a ton about on Substack because we've seen people that have started using AI to write their stuff and generate a lot of content. And some of these people have gotten popular by doing it. And it's just a shame that people feel the need that they would have to, they want something so badly. And this is a tale as old as time. People have wanted something so badly that they've sacrificed morals and ethics to do it. And
Right.
unfortunately, writing a book is no different. So it sounds like in your case, you were able to stay true and authentic to what you believed in. And I think that is one of the most admirable qualities of any creative person is to like bring your genuine art. Like that's the one thing that I think is the most frustrating thing about this whole AI movement is that when you present an article or something that you say, I wrote this, but you didn't really write it. Like that's lying to people. You're being
Right.
dishonest. And I would rather read something that you wrote genuinely, even if it's maybe not as good, which I would argue that your human writing is always going to be better than the machine's writing. That's just my
Right.
take on it. But in either way, I would rather read your human writing over a machine's writing. But rant aside, what would you say to authors, writers that are struggling with believing that their voice matters or being confident in their own writing voice and maybe feeling like they have to emulate somebody else? I mean, it sounds like you've been able to just stay true to Vince Vawter and believing in what you wanted to write.
Yeah. I go back to my agent. She said you wrote what you wanted to. You didn't take into account all these publishing mandates.
Hmm.
You just told your story in Paperboy the way you wanted to. And, you know, that was your style. And that came through. And, uh, you know, I didn't try to fool anybody.
Hmm.
I didn't know it was going to be a success. I thought I'd be just riding around on my tractor and playing golf, in retirement.
Yeah.
I've spoken at over 200 schools,
Wow.
and it's been so rewarding, and it actually came about because I kind of stuck to my guns. I
Hmm.
didn't know what I was doing. I just wanted to stay true to myself. And I mean, that's the way it turned out. There's a book out now called Theo of Golden. I don't know if you've heard about that. It's
No.
self-published and it was acquired by Simon and Schuster, I think, and it's selling millions and millions of copies now. Well, in my view, and I've read the book, it's not a very good book, but he told the story the way he wanted to. Uh, he was an older gentleman like me, I'll soon be 80 years old.
Yeah.
And so I can kind of do what I want to do because I'm 80 years old and I'm fairly comfortable, so
Yeah.
I mean, I can do what I want to do. Now, younger writers, they have to be more malleable. They have to
Yeah.
play the game a little bit more, and they have to figure things out. It is it is so comforting to know that I can write what I want to write, and if it pleases me, I mean, I'm trying to please myself. I'm not trying to please everybody else,
Hmm.
and that can give you a certain freedom. I'm almost glad I didn't try to get into this when I was 20 or 30 years old. I think I would have been frustrated.
Hmm.
I think I would have given up. But there's a certain, there's some good things about being 80 years old. I guess that's what I should say.
That's great. No, I love that you had a story that you believed in and you didn't really feel like you wanted to change it. Just, you wanted to tell your story. And I
Right,
think a lot of people, and maybe it is because of the stage of life you're in, but a young writer looking to maybe build a career, they might take the advice from the publisher and change the book just so they could get it published
right,
by a big publisher. And my theory is that when you do those sorts of things, you often don't, maybe some people feel differently, but for me, I would not be able to feel as proud of the finished product if I knew that I made concessions or compromises that
right,
were against really what I wanted to do. And look, there's times where like editors make really good suggestions, and that this is true in my journalism career that I would not have known, and I'm glad that they made those suggestions and I took those. But yeah, there are times where you got to know what hills to die on and what hills to not die on, and
right.
uh, I think at the end of the day, it sounds like, you're able to look at this book and all the other ones that you've written and feel proud of it because like you can see that's truly your creation. That's truly a representation of your writing and the story that you had in mind.
Yeah, it sounds like that I never took any guidance from my editors. That's not the case.
Oh yeah, no, I guarantee you took a ton of advice.
They
Yeah.
had some very good
Yeah.
suggestions, which I took, changing this character. Well, one good example is the first draft of Paperboy. It didn't have the central character in it, which it needed, and that was the Paperboy's mentor.
Yeah.
Well, that was told to me, and I said, I think you're right. I mean, I
Yeah.
think I've got to have that. So, I mean, I took a lot of advice
Yeah.
from editors, but uh, I just, as you said, I planted my flag on some hills, a- and I didn't want to give those up, and
Yeah.
so I didn't. Yeah.
Yeah. When you look back on your long career in journalism and now writing books, what are you most proud of?
Um, I'm proud. Well, let me answer it this way. Uh,
I know that's
a,
a loaded question, kind of, because you have a lot of things probably, but
a student at a middle school asked me, uh, you know, all these things happened to you, and that was 65 years ago. How do you remember them in such detail? And I started wondering that myself.
Mhm.
Why do why does something that happened 65 years ago stay so close to me? And I mean, it's like it happened yesterday. And I think the answer is uh, these things which I write about were so traumatic at that time that their scars are still there. Uh, and they made a very deep impression on me, and that's why I'm able to recall them. Let me tell you this quick story. Uh, when I was writing Paperboy, I always write. I start at 4 o'clock in the morning. I
Wow.
write until about 8 or 9 o'clock, and then I'm done. I can't write anymore.
Mhm.
Well, I was having a good writing day, and so I started at 4 o'clock. And on this particular day, I think I wrote until about noon. My daughter came over for lunch. And, we started talking, and she said, "How did it go this morning?" And I said, "Oh, it went fine and everything." And then she started looking at me, and she said, "Are you feeling okay?" And I said, "Yeah, I'm feeling fine." And she said, "Well, I've never heard you stutter like this." And it dawned on me that I was stuttering like my 11-year-old self was stuttering, just
Wow.
because I had gone so deep into my 11-year-old brain
It's like some
that,
method writing or
that
something.
I brought the stutter back, and that was kind of eye-opening to
Yeah.
me. Like, well, I probably was doing something good because I was able to place myself back in 1959, and that's I think that's part of it. So what you read is what happened. Those are the feelings which happened. So I think that's important, and all that boils down to write what you know,
Hmm.
and I think that's very, very true.
That was one thing that I learned a lot in college and when I was in creative writing classes was to write what you know. And
Yeah.
uh, I think that's wise words. That's awesome. So that's I can just imagine you're it's like when a character gets or when an actor gets really into a character and they kind of become that character. That's sort of what it
Right.
sounds like. So you must have really been in the zone writing that day.
Well, yeah, and it takes a little time to break out of that. I mean, you kind of need to go out on the porch and just kind of decompress a little bit. Yeah.
Yeah, that's great. So if people want to connect with you, find your books, what are the best ways to do that? I know you're on Substack a little bit. That's where I've been connecting with you,
Yeah,
but
yeah. Mostly I read on Substack because I don't think I'm smart enough to write on Substack.
I
I
would
mean, there's
disagree
some
with
good
that.
stuff on there that,
Yeah.
I just, sometimes I start reading and I spend all afternoon
Yeah.
uh, on Substack. VinceVawter.com, that's my website, and that's where you can see all the books, see what I've written. And then, a Paperboy still amazes me. Random House still ships about 100 copies a week, and it's been out for what 13 years now.
Wow.
I mean, it's just amazing, but it's got some staying power, and I can kind of understand that. It's not only for people who stutter; it's for people who are going through any kind of a challenge, whether it could be anxiety, it could be family problems, it could be anything. It's a good look at staying true to yourself.
Yeah. Who
Yeah.
knows? We might see it on Broadway being produced as a Broadway
Well,
show.
well, well, there's a possibility, and I've talked to two movie companies,
Oh,
and
wow.
they get me all excited, and then they drop me like a hot
Yeah.
rock. One of them had started casting it already. They said, "Well, we're going to get Shaquille O'Neal to play Big Sack, and we're going to do this." And I'm thinking, "Oh boy, here comes the red carpet." Then they wouldn't answer my calls. So
Shaquille
all
O'Neal.
that's just what they do, and they're going to do what they're going to do.
Yeah.
So I'm not concerned about it.
That's great. Vince, the last question that I love to ask my guests, the name of the show is In No Hurry, and obviously we talk more about creativity and those sorts of things. And for me, creativity is a way to slow down. But for you at this stage of life, what are some things that you do to just kind of slow down? And I know you're writing, you're reading on Substack, but uh, I don't know how busy life gets for you now in retirement. But what are some things you do to kind of relax and just kind of chill out a little bit?
I get out on my tractor
There you go.
and I ride on my tractor, and I mean, it's almost like meditation. When I bump along on my tractor, I can think about anything I want to, And I think I do some of my best writing while on my tractor. Sometimes it's meditative, and sometimes, I can work out a, a plot twist or something.
Yeah.
So my tractor's my friend, and yeah.
I've noticed too when I go out even just for a walk, just getting my body moving, it's like it gets the creative juices flowing, and I'll
Exactly.
often start taking notes in my phone for ideas that I have for just like a Substack essay or some part of my book or just some other idea I have, and I notice that the more I move my body or I'm just doing something other than sitting around, the creative juices get flowing.
Sometimes I'll go on walks with my hound dog, and she'll be on a leash, and I'll think about something, and I have to put it down in my phone, and of course I have to stop, and she keeps tugging on me. Let's keep going, and I said, no, I'm writing, and she doesn't understand that. She wants to keep going, and but I've got a hold of the leash, so she's got to do what I got to do. So.
Yeah, there you go. Vince, it was great talking with you, and I appreciate all of the wisdom about your writing career, navigating publishing, just the writing process. This is a really cool conversation. I'm excited to see even more how Paperboy and these other books go forth in our world. We might see a movie soon at some point, but I do feel like if we're already getting to a professional stage in New Hampshire, I feel like we're not too far off from seeing it on
Right.
Broadway.
Right. Well, I'm just kind of along for the ride. I do try to stay true to myself and true to the story, though.
Yeah, I love it.
Yeah.
Well, thanks so much for joining the show. It was great talking with you.
I thank you, Cole.
Well, thanks so much to Vince for joining me on the show this week. He and I have gotten a chance to connect recently on Substack, as we mentioned, and he's kind of become a fan of the show, which has been really cool. And he reached out and he was like, "Hey, I have this book, and would you want to talk about it?" And of course, so I'm glad we had this conversation. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you guys learned a lot from him, especially if you're a writer. What's cool is he shared how he didn't think that if he had gotten into writing in his younger years that it would have panned out the same way. And so I really enjoyed hearing his perspective of basically it's not too late to start on something. So whatever age you are, he started writing books when he was older. And I think that's really cool. So I appreciate him coming on to share this journey. And I also encourage you to follow him on Substack, check out his website, vincevawter.com. Get his books. You can check out his work. And then obviously mentioned his show is going to be performed in New Hampshire professionally, and I think at some point it'll be on Broadway, so that'll be really cool to follow. But thanks so much for tuning in. I would love to connect with you. You can find me on Substack. That's where I'm spending the most time, as I've mentioned. You can find me on Instagram, Facebook as well. Just search my name. You'll find it there, or check the links in the show notes. But again, thanks so much for listening. I hope you guys find some time this week to relax and not be in a hurry, and we'll catch you next time.